Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Warren Seubel. I'm from JP Morgan. I'm joined today by Gayathri Vasudev, who's also from JP Morgan. We are here to talk about reducing friction in payments. We're going to be coming at this from sort of two different angles, and we're excited to hopefully have a dynamic conversation here today. And if everybody can see the channel on the right-hand side of your screen, just to pepper us with questions as we're going through. Really, at the end of the day, what we are trying to tackle in this session with all of you in concert is how do we reduce cross-border payment frictions? We, Gayathri and myself, are part of the payments division here at JP Morgan, where we move over 10 trillion a day around the globe, both through US dollar clearing, et cetera, et cetera. And so the biggest name of the game for us as we think about the medium and long-term growth of this company and really of this space is how do we make that much more efficient and easier to do business, both internally here at JP Morgan, but most importantly for all of our clients. And a key focus for us is Canada and how we grow our Canadian business, but how do we partner better with a lot of our counterparts within the Canadian sphere? And we'll dig into that a little bit better as we go along. But I wanted to turn the mic over to Gayathri to both introduce herself, but also tackle a couple of questions that I have. But Gayathri, do you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Yes, thank you, Warren. And I'm sorry you can't see me, but we're having some technical difficulties with the platform and our JP Morgan firewall. So my name is Gayathri Vasudev, and I run the global clearing payments product within JP Morgan. And as Warren mentioned, we move close to $10 trillion a day. And obviously that means we are very much a significant part of the payment ecosystem, servicing clients across the globe. So Warren, back to you.
Sure. So I think one of the first big questions that we have is, as you think about the payments ecosystem rapidly evolving, what are some of the biggest trends and changes that you're seeing from the ground? Just seeing as you've had many different roles within the payments org, but really kind of give us a sense of what trends and changes you're seeing in the space from your perch.
Yeah, I think, if you look at the payment system, it's obviously evolving very rapidly. If you think about it, every world event has driven some significant changes in the payments landscape, changing our business models, leveraging technology in new ways, and fundamentally changing the way money moves. So let's take a trip down memory lane, right? When 9/11 happened, there was much more increased focus around resiliency and operations, but also around making sure that we can track and stop terrorist financing. Then in 2008, with the financial crisis, came a sequence of events that basically turned business models on their head. Satoshi Nakamoto wrote his or her white paper that gave birth to Bitcoin. The distrust of traditional financial institutions led to the birth of DeFi or decentralized finance. And it was also the same time that fintechs like Wise were launched with their Wake Up to the Hidden Fees campaign. And they were there to disrupt the traditional banks. And in some ways, they were aided by the regulators who clamped down on the traditional financial institutions with regulations such as Dodd-Frank, PSD2, open banking, etc. And all of these regulations were really designed to make the end customers' payment experience more transparent and give them more choices. And you sort of move along, and in 2016, there was Brexit. And again, a lot of financial institutions needed to think of their European footprint. JP Morgan, for example, has since set up JPM SE in Europe, which has allowed us to become the second largest Euro clearing bank in the world. And then, of course, we're all aware of the Black Swan event, which happened around COVID-19. Of course, that accelerated digitization. Things like efforts to have digital signatures, which we had been talking about for years, if not months, suddenly came to fruition within a matter of weeks. What is lesser known is during that period, because banks started to see a lot of revenue pressure, there was renewed focus on new areas of revenue, like, for example, crypto trading, consumer-to-consumer cross-border payments, which were traditionally maybe dominated by non-bank players. And finally, coming to the present day, if you look at all the geopolitical events of the last few months around Ukraine and Russia, they have really emphasized the complexity of sanctions across multiple jurisdictions, US, UK, EU, Canada, etc. And in the absence of structured data formats in payments, like we will have with ISO 20022, banks have had to resort with many manual processes to ensure that we are in compliance with the various regulations. This is an example. One of the EU regulations restricted purchase of luxury goods from Russia. Some others allowed oil and gas imports. So without structured data in place for the purpose of payment, it's actually very, very time-consuming and manual for banks to scour through all the payments to see which payments need to be stopped and released. So obviously, things like ISO will tremendously help the changing landscape there. So if I look at all of these events and the changes they have brought forth, to me, they essentially boil down into three categories. The first is around the advent of new payment types. The second is around new technologies. And finally, because of the new payments and the new technologies, the new risks that are associated with it. What do I mean by new payments? So obviously, it could be different payout methods. We've got used to no longer just paying into accounts. We want to be able to pay into people's wallets, etc. The financial institutions can use any number of payment rails. There used to be the wire rails or the RTGS systems before, and that was the only game in town for cross-border payments. But increasingly, it's moving to ACH, to real-time payments, and even distributed ledger platforms. Then you have the emergence of closed-loop systems, right? So you have things like, especially in the Gulf, we have some new closed-loop payment systems like Buna and the Gulf Payments Company. In Asia, we have Partior. These are very new for the payments ecosystem. And then also you have the central banks getting into the mix with central bank digital currencies. So we've seen a lot of new payment types coming into the system. And more than ever before, you have a confluence of new technologies, whether it's blockchain, cloud, APIs, big data, machine learning, etc. And as I mentioned earlier, with new payments, with new technology, and with the changing geopolitical events come new risks, right? Obviously, as we innovate, so do the fraudsters. And so we've seen a higher incident of fraud, not just in the cyberspace, but also regular, more traditional channels. And there is also increasingly the risk of non-compliance to the constantly changing regulations around the world. So some of the things that we've seen as a result of these changing events, as well as the changing trends, is that we've seen the birth of new products. Like, for example, with JP Morgan, we've launched PayDirect, which really blurs payment rails and allows banks to capture new revenue streams. So that is some of what we're seeing in the evolving marketplace.
Now, when you mentioned PayDirect in there, obviously, which is a big effort for JP Morgan Payments, but also for yourself specifically, and it blurs the line between payment rails. I mean, can you talk a little bit about that being a saturated market? Like, do we really need another payment rail, so to speak? Maybe give a little bit of light on that.
Yeah, trust you to ask the tough questions, Warren. But jokes aside, it's a great question. I think if you look at that market, the consumer-to-consumer payment space is a $700 billion market, which is predominantly dominated by the non-bank segment, right? And there's a reason for it. In the past, the banks did not want to enter that space because of compliance reasons. Also, like I mentioned, the only game in town for cross-border money transfer at that time was wires, and wires can be expensive. And really, for consumer-to-consumer cross-border payments, you needed to be able to leverage different payout methods to pay locally without deductions, lower cost, etc. And for banks to operate in that space in the past, they needed to actually have accounts all over the world, have access to the local clearing systems, meaning that they would open multiple Nostro accounts, have to manage that liquidity and risk and all of that, which was exceedingly complex. So it wasn't easy for them to build out that product solution. And that's where something like PayDirect comes in, because what we have decided to do is to leverage our network and our infrastructure to provide bank clients the ability to attract and retain consumer-to-consumer payments, right? So this solution is intended to be a low-cost, scalable way to just plug and play and offer the underlying customers a better solution.
That's great. Thanks for digging into that. Can you talk about some of the markets that you're really focused on and the expansion plans that you might be having for PayDirect?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. We have, our vision is to be able to send any payment anywhere in any currency. But to start off, we've looked at some of the larger markets where we have demand coming from. As an example, we first started with the Taiwan-Indonesia corridor. In Taiwan, we had the segment was dominated by the non-bank players, like I mentioned, and there were a lot of Indonesian immigrants in Taiwan looking to make payments back to Indonesia. And Indonesia had a strange quirk, which is that any payments going into Indonesia have to have a name and account number matched, right? So that added much more complexity to the banks. They didn't want to get into that space because in the past they'd had a lot of return payments. It was a bad user experience. So we offered them PayDirect, which was not just a way for them to send payments very quickly, and they're doing it almost real time actually. So that was one thing. But more importantly, the Taiwanese banks didn't need to change the way they process the payments. They could just send SWIFT messages, and we would take that and route it through the quickest way possible. But more importantly, we combined it with our Liink Confirm application, which I'm sure we will talk about a little bit more later, where we were able to confirm the account number and name before the payment was sent. So in the end, it was an end-to-end much better customer experience. So that was the Taiwan-Indonesia solution. We have built out a solution of payments into the US, into India, which is a huge corridor, and are looking to launch many more corridors by the end of this year.
That's great. And obviously there's been a lot of development over the last couple of years between the two solutions that you talk about there, between Liink and, or formerly In and PayDirect. So excited about some of the marriage between those two efforts.
Yeah. I think this is a good segue to ask you, Warren. I know we spoke at this very conference a few years ago about the Interbank Information Network, which has now been renamed as Liink. Can you talk about sort of the evolution of that network and, where we are at this point with Liink?
Sure. I mean, one of the biggest evolutions is just the belief in blockchain technology for the bank. If you have listened to CNBC or Wall Street Journal and seen some of the interviews by Jamie Dimon, you would think that he hates crypto, right? And I think that's just a general misunderstanding by the market of the predominance of crypto versus blockchain. There's one thing that Jamie and the operating committee here at JP Morgan love, it's the blockchain technology, and hence have invested a tremendous amount of research, development, and dollars into the blockchain technology. And so really over the last 2 years since we last spoke at this conference where we unveiled the Interbank Information Network, which is now named Liink, we have gone back and we've actually built the network, we've built the applications, we've built the infrastructure. And so we've taken a lot of that lead, that market lead that we have, and actually put real man and woman power behind it. Over the last 2 years, We have obviously been building the Liink network, but we've also been working on other efforts like JP Morgan Coin, which I'll get into in a little bit, but also different zero knowledge base centers, the Internet of Things network, a multi-currency network in Singapore. We also been working on space-based payments, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's a lot of just cool, innovative things we've been doing on the blockchain side. But most importantly, as pertains to the Liink information network, we've really built that underlying infrastructure. And we now have a number of applications that are live on it. So thank you to all of the partners that we have in Canada. All of the big name banks have been in one way, shape, or form part of that knowledge process. We have a couple of live participants as well within Canada that are helping to bolster a couple of our applications. And so it's really been a collaborative effort cross-border collaborative effort between us here in the US and our partners in Canada. So very excited to see kind of how things have really started to gel and come together. Within Liink, we have a number of different applications that we can really point to here. One of the biggest applications that was right out of the gate was for sanctions hits. So rectifying sanctions hits, we named that application Resolve. Now, there's not a big commercial opportunity there, and there's some adoption between our regions. But the real application that's coming into the fray at this point is an application called Confirm. This is for global account verification. Currently, there's a lot of regional and sub-regional schemes that allow within a country people and corporates to validate whether an account is open, if it's tied to the right name, if you've seen fraudulent activity, et cetera, et cetera. In the US, there's a couple of solutions like early warning services and Gayathri. In the UK, confirmation of payee, so on and so forth. So many countries have their own existing solution. But there's nothing that ties all those different schemes and different solutions together. And so that's what Confirm is really focused on these days, is building out that responder network of all of the different schemes, many large global institutions, and many other fintechs, so that when we get to the end of the day and we have a large responder community, the vision is that we will be able to enable any person, any institution, any corporate around the globe to verify whether an account exists, whether it's open, and that it's tied to the correct person and or legal entity, and that there's been successful transaction activity on that account. And we are building that currently now. We have partners in Canada, a couple of partners in Canada that are going live on the solution from the responder side. We also have participants in a number of countries, just to name a few, coming out of Germany, Netherlands, many other participants within Western Europe. We're looking in Mexico and Brazil, as well as throughout Asia. Indonesia is a live corridor, working with Singapore, Hong Kong, as well as coverage for all of India. So we're very excited about that responder coverage, which will then open up the floodgates, of course, for the inquiry side, which is really V2. We want to stand up the network on the one side so that we can then give power to the inquiry side on Confirm. And that actually goes hand in hand with what we were talking about on Pay, or what Gayathri was just talking about on PayDirect, right? Where you want to be able to send money across border into Indonesia, but again, you need to be able to confirm that the name and account number match. So that was one of the genesis and how the marriage between our two applications work.
If I look at, you've done a lot of work in the blockchain space, obviously, and we've brought up a lot of production grade applications on the blockchain. How do you think companies should be preparing for the broad blockchain upgrade that is coming?
Sure. Good question. And it's something that we get very, very frequently, because whether it's a corporate or a financial institution, everybody's worried about the blockchain revolution, as it were. And what do I need to be doing today to put these processes into BAU? And the first way of answering that is, many of the blockchain applications that are going to be happening out there will be existing behind the scenes. They will be part of the BAU processing within the banks and the financial institutions, within the ledgering systems, within a lot of the underlying fabric and infrastructure of the financial services sector. So if you're a corporate, you may be already using some of the different blockchain technologies that are out there. To the degree that my 4.5-year-old son, when he is my age, will know a lot more about blockchain than I think the average person my age, but then will also be using blockchain without his knowledge. It's just part of the fabric of commerce. So in order to move that ball forward from whether it be a corporate or an FI perspective, it's all about making sure that the data is clean, that the infrastructure is clean, so that when these upgrades are actually taking place, that it slots in with BAU API processing, for example. So one of the biggest pieces of advice that we give our partners is make sure that your data is clean. Make sure that it's all searchable, that it's able to be hooked up via API, that you don't have data in many, many disparate systems that are not speaking to each other, and that at the end of the day, you can make sure that when the upgrades are happening, when there's new, really interesting, sexy applications that are coming out that are related to blockchain, maybe even crypto, but we're just talking about blockchain, that you're able to integrate with those with ease. You can't do that if your data is a spaghetti bowl, so to speak. That's one of the interesting reasons why our European counterparts have been very, very easy to integrate with a lot of the blockchain systems that we're developing here at JP Morgan and Onyx, is because of the open banking upgrades that have been going on for the last few years. When we look at our European partners and we want to connect them into Confirm to be a responder on all of their accounts that they may have globally, it's as simple as a single API firehose coming out of their backend systems, because they've been doing a lot of the cleanup internally. So that's the biggest piece of advice that I would give to our partners that we're looking to build with.
Yeah, if I can ask you just one more question, and then I'll let you ask me some. In terms of blockchain, where do you see blockchain changing or enhancing practices for enterprise banking in the future?
Sure. And again, it sort of goes into what I was saying there before. I mean, a lot of these applications will be going on behind the scenes. It's allowing for seamless integration for back office processes. When we think about Liink, a lot of the applications that we're developing at Liink are for really unsexy things. First and foremost, account verification, not something that many of my friends will even think is interesting, but it will make the cross-border payment ecosystem run that much more smoothly. We're able to take cancellations and rejects down from 3% to 0.5%. It's a lot of money and savings and better client experience given out there. If we think about also some of the other things, check processing, digitizing checks, resolving sanctions hits, enabling cross-border FX transactions so that you know what the base FX is for any foreign account. All of these are not particularly sexy blockchain applications, but they ultimately will make the global ecosystem run that much more smoothly. So I can't necessarily make a comment on custody or crypto trading, et cetera, but I do think that one of the massive applications for blockchain over the course of the next 5 to 10 years is on the operations side. So within FinServe, obviously the expansion of margin, making sure that we're passing on savings to our clients is really going to be name of the game over the course of the next 5 to 10 years. And so in order to keep up with that, ourselves and a lot of our counterparts, particularly with our partners in Canada, is all about creating efficiencies and capturing more margin. So I guess one question that I would ask sorry, go ahead.
No, absolutely. I think for anyone who thinks that this is unsexy, I would say wait till you have the experience of a payment getting rejected and waiting for 7 days to get the account number right. You will appreciate these applications of it.
Exactly. So I'd actually flip the script back to you for a second, Gayathri, and say, look, the question you asked me before is what can we be doing on the blockchain side for BAU processing? But same thing goes for you. I mean, what can banks and to a certain extent, even some corporates be doing to get their house in order and make investments for the future?
Yeah, I think, there's, as I mentioned earlier, there's a confluence of new technologies like never before. And so I think you want to be, first and foremost, in an environment that encourages innovation, right? So I as a product leader, I feel like you should think and operate with a startup mentality. And what I mean by that is we have to be really nimble as an industry, whether that comes from developing products in an agile hybrid model. You need to be able to invest in products and solutions that can rapidly morph depending on where your customer needs are changing. So that's the first thing, to be able to take customer feedback very quickly and pivot appropriately. The second is, I would say, don't do something just because the technology is cool. And if this was a live audience, I would be looking at all those blockchain enthusiasts in the room, because that's not a good reason to do something. Do it if there is an underlying business case behind it, which is why actually I'm not a big fan of working in an innovation lab type environment, because it's very easy to get caught up in sort of hobby projects and put good money after bad. And I think if you look at JP Morgan, we've done a really good job of straddling that challenge as it comes to new technology. So, for example, we set up the Blockchain Center of Excellence, and the team looked at the technology. They were so good at it that they were actually able to develop Quorum, which is an offshoot of Ethereum, which is meant for better scalability and for banking applications because of things like data privacy that's built in. But more than that, we were able to take that technology and then work with the different business units to come up with proofs of concept and pilots before actually get into a production environment. So that then allows you to see, is there a real business case? Are you willing to invest your money behind this technology? That's really the true test of making something production grade. So I think that's really important as it comes when you think about new technology and how it affects the business. But, we should also be looking at other types of upgrades that are coming that are not necessarily based on sexy technology, but on things like, let's take a look at ISO 20022. That's a big book of work for financial institutions across the world. But people should not look at this just as a technology migration. You really need to be able to leverage ISO and monetize it and make better user experiences, better products for your clients. So, for example, we all know ISO can give you structured data. So can we make that structured data machine readable? Can you use that to increase operational efficiencies or to be able to find new revenue opportunities by designing products and services which are very specific to our clients because we have all this data about them? So, and I think we should learn from our past experiences. I think the payment industry learned a huge lesson from implementing Swift GPI. A lot of banks spend significant amount of resources and investment dollars in, passing the unique identification number, or UETR as you call it, to help tracking payments, right? Which is great. That was sorely needed for the industry. It made things more transparent. But I do believe that a lot of financial institutions spent less resources in thinking about how they would use that information that they got from the tracker. So you need to be able to harness the new data that's coming in to make sure your systems can ingest that data and to make meaningful solutions for your clients at the back of it. Otherwise, that investment is a lost investment. So I would say any technological improvement, any new innovation that we want to come up with, we need to look at it with a client lens. And as long as we do that, then we can really integrate it into the BAU. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. It does. Just one thing, I see that we have a question from a participant here asking if confirmation of payee service is available in Canada. And I'll just take that question real quick, Gayathri, if that's okay with you. The point is that confirmation of payee is not available in Canada per se. It's available in the UK, but we're giving a global access to potential global access to something like confirmation of payee by stitching together regional schemes like confirmation of payee and PayTM and some of these other technologies around the world so that you can actually go to a singular place like Confirm to get access to the banking information. So really, we're looking at how to create that global network that resembles confirmation of payee, but on a global scale.
I don't know if we have any other questions online, but otherwise I thought maybe I could wrap up with a final question, Warren.
Sure.
You spoke a lot about Liink and the various applications that we are thinking about, but I know we have the broader Onyx umbrella. Would you spend some more time talking about how Liink fits into Onyx and what else we have going on?
Sure, absolutely. So for those on the line that aren't familiar, so Liink is part of Onyx. About a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, the operating committee, obviously led by Jamie Dimon, decided to pull together all of the firm's blockchain-related efforts into one house. So think of it as a store within a store, a company within inside the company. And so Onyx now has about 250 employees, all focused on delivering blockchain applications to the financial services and large corporate market. We've decided we split that into 4 main stripes. The first stripe being Linked, which we've spoken about, which is for information sharing on blockchain. The other stripes are Coin Systems, which is our effort for the digitization of assets. So within Coin Systems, we've created JP Morgan Coin. Forget the fact that it has JP Morgan at the front of it, but this is a, air quotes, stable coin type of system that's really a ledgering system. So it's not a stable coin, but it is a ledgering system that enables banks and financial institutions to share the same ledger for 24/7, 365 payments around the globe. Now, what this enables us to do is piggyback on existing DDA infrastructure that allows whether it be corporates or financial institutions to move money within the same ledger that's all being shared. So that's JP Morgan Coin. Also within Coin Systems is our project Partior, which is in Singapore. It's a partnership that has been spun out. It's a standalone company, but very closely tied to what we're doing. And that's a shared partnership between JP Morgan, DBS, Temasek, to again have a shared ledger between large-scale financial institutions. Now, when we look at the next stripe, which is Onyx Digital Assets, that's where we house all of our tokenization efforts. Obviously, people hear of tokenization related to NFTs, et cetera, and obviously there's a portion of that business line. But at the end of the day, we're looking at tokenizing financial assets. One of the projects or actual applications within Onyx Digital Assets is intraday repo. This allows for atomic settlements of intraday repo and overnight repo between financial institutions, currently actually going on between JP Morgan and Goldman and a number of financial institutions that we're also working with. But we've already transacted nearly $300 billion of intraday repo transactions, which is a very, very large number for a solution that's actually relatively young and one of our most exciting efforts there. And the fourth stripe is our blockchain launch. So what we want to make sure that we're doing is giving the care, feeding, daylight, R&D, however you want to think about it, to some of the best ideas that are coming up from around JP Morgan, but within our partner ecosystem. As we're partnering with other financial institutions or multinational corporations, a lot of times they will say to us, man, I have this great idea. I just don't know where it fits in my organization, or I can't actually really get it off the ground. Well, we want to know about that. We want to develop things in concert with our partners to give R&D, to give product, to give engineering time on some of those great ideas that could become the next billion-dollar idea. We don't want them just sitting in the bottom of a drawer somewhere and kicking ourselves years from now that we didn't actually give the daylight and R&D dollars to some great ideas. So that's our blockchain launch effort. So really, again, when you break out the Onyx division, JP Morgan Liink, which is for value exchange on blockchain, Onyx Digital Assets, Coin Systems, and blockchain launch. And that's how we're really encapsulating, again, blockchain. You didn't really hear much about crypto in there, obviously, because we're looking at investments in blockchain infrastructure, which we think the bet that we're making is that when you look back on this blockchain revolution 5-10 years from now, I think a small portion is going to be crypto, of course, and it's obviously a lot of money is being put at that. But blockchain will really be part of the fabric that makes this entire global economy run.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And as an owner of a more traditional product, we're looking at what you're doing in the Onyx space and trying to integrate that with our products. So, for example, what you're doing in coin systems, can that make all our clearing payments 24/7, 365 days a year? And that's really the vision.
Great. Well, thank you everybody for your time today. If there's any other questions before we sign off, please pop them into the Ask the Speaker section. Otherwise, we will go ahead and wrap. Thank you very much, Gayathri, for dialing in. And thank you to Payments Canada for giving us some airtime. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good rest of the day.